Captain Kozlova, according to our flight schedules, you weren't assigned to this sector today, he continued. Can you explain how you happen to be in position to respond to Bravo 7's emergency? The question touched on the complicated reality of combat aviation in Afghanistan, where rigid scheduling often conflicted with tactical flexibility and pilot initiative. Viper's presence in the area had resulted from a combination of mission completion ahead of schedule and her personal habit of extending patrol time to provide additional coverage for ground forces. Sir, I had completed my assigned reconnaissance mission early and elected to extend my patrol time in case additional tasking became available, she replied, her words carefully chosen to avoid any suggestion of protocol violation. I was monitoring the emergency frequency when Bravo 7's initial distress call came through. The explanation satisfied procedural requirements while revealing something deeper about Viper's approach to combat aviation. Most pilots completed their assigned missions and returned to base, following procedures that prioritize safety and efficiency over tactical opportunism. But the exceptional ones, the pilots who became legends among ground forces, possessed an intuitive understanding that combat rarely conformed to scheduled expectations. Colonel Thornfield studied the mission timeline displayed on his screen, noting the precise coordination between Viper's arrival and the radio crackled through the Afghanistan morning with desperation that would haunt every soul in the operations center for years to come. Mayday, Mayday, this is Bravo 7. We are taking heavy fire, multiple casualties, requesting immediate close air support, grid 375921. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of 19 soldiers pinned down in a valley that had become their tomb. The Taliban had orchestrated the perfect ambush, turning what should have been a routine patrol into a nightmare of crossfire and chaos. In the dimly lit Tactical Operations Center at Bagram Airfield, Colonel Marcus Thornfield stared at the digital map with the cold calculation of a man who had made impossible decisions before. The red dot pulsed ominously in the Kunar province, surrounded by mountainous terrain that swallowed aircraft whole and spat out twisted metal. Every available asset was either grounded for maintenance, committed to other missions, or simply too far away to matter. The math was brutal and unforgiving. 23 minutes for the closest Apache, 18 for fast movers that couldn't provide the precision needed with friendlies so close to the enemy. Sir, we've got nothing airborne that can reach them in time, reported Lieutenant Collins, his voice barely steady as he cycled through every possible option on his screen. The young officer's hands trembled slightly as he processed the reality that good men were dying, while they watched helplessly from hundreds of miles away. Thornfield's jaw tightened as another transmission broke through. Bravo 7, we're down to 30% ammo, Johnson's bleeding out. We can't hold much longer. The colonel had commanded thousands of sorties, orchestrated campaigns across 2 theaters, and earned every ribbon on his chest through decades of impossible choices. But this moment, this desperate plea echoing through static-filled speakers, would define everything he thought he knew about leadership and sacrifice. The operations center fell into the kind of silence that precedes either miracles or tragedies. 12 personnel stared at screens showing friendly forces surrounded by hostile contacts, their blue icons slowly being overwhelmed by an advancing red tide. Time moved differently in these moments, each second stretching like hours, while 19 American soldiers fought for their lives in a valley that had become their potential grave. Then, cutting through the static and desperation like a blade through darkness, came a voice that would change everything. Bagram Control, this is Reaper 2-4, A-10 Thunderbolt, requesting immediate tasking. The transmission was calm, professional, carrying an authority that seemed to defy the chaos surrounding them. In that moment, Colonel Thornfield would make a decision that violated every protocol he had sworn to uphold, setting in motion events that would transform skepticism into legend and prove that heroism often wears the most unexpected face. The colonel's weathered fingers hovered over his headset as he processed the unexpected lifeline. Reaper 2-4. He didn't recognize the call sign, which meant either a new arrival or someone flying under temporary assignment. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog, was built for exactly this scenario: close air support in environments where precision mattered more than speed. But protocol demanded confirmation of pilot qualifications, current munitions load, and authorization codes that would consume precious minutes while soldiers died. Reaper 2-4, what's your current position and armament status? Lieutenant Collins transmitted, his training overriding the urgency that screamed through every speaker. Standard procedure existed for good reasons. Friendly fire incidents had taught the Air Force hard lessons about rushing into complex situations without proper coordination. The response came immediately, crisp and confident. Currently 15 miles northwest of target area, carrying full-load GAU-8 with 1,800 rounds, 6 AGM-65 Mavericks, and 2,000-pound JDAMs. I can be on station in 4 minutes. There was something in that voice, not just competence, but the kind of quiet certainty that came from someone who had done this before, probably under worse circumstances. Colonel Thornfield felt the weight of 19 lives pressing against his chest as he stared at the tactical display. Every regulation he had memorized, every lesson learned from decades of careful coordination, screamed against authorizing an unknown pilot into a danger-close situation. The mountains of Afghanistan had claimed too many aircraft, too many good people who thought they could thread the needle between heroism and catastrophe. But then Rodriguez's voice cut through the debate raging in his mind. Bagram, we've got multiple KIA. I count at least 40 insurgents moving to overrun our position. If someone doesn't help us right now, we're all going home in boxes. The raw desperation in the staff sergeant's transmission settled the matter with brutal finality. Thornfield keyed his microphone, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. Reaper 2-4, you are cleared direct to grid 375921. Bravo 7 is taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Row is weapons-free on any hostile forces, but be advised we have wounded friendlies who cannot move. He paused, the weight of his decision evident in the silence that followed. And 2-4, they're counting on you. The response that came back would echo through the operations center long after the morning sun had climbed above the Hindu Kush. Copy all, Bagram. 2-4 is inbound, and I'm bringing the thunder. Captain Valentina, Viper, Kozlova banked her A-10 hard left, the twin General Electric TF-34 engines responding with the reliable growl that had carried her through 3 combat deployments. The Thunderbolt II wasn't built for grace. It was built for survival, designed around the massive GAU-8 Avenger cannon that could turn enemy armor into scrap metal from over a mile away. As she descended toward the valley where Bravo 7 was fighting for their lives, Viper felt the familiar calm that had earned her the respect of every ground unit she had ever supported, even if that respect had been hard-won. Her path to this moment had been carved through skepticism and discrimination that would have broken lesser pilots. Born in Brighton Beach to Ukrainian immigrants who had fled Soviet oppression, Viper had learned early that proving herself meant doing everything twice as well as those who doubted her. The Air Force Academy had been brutal, not just the academic rigor or physical demands, but the constant whispers that she was taking a spot from someone who belonged. Flight school had been worse, with instructors who seemed determined to wash her out and classmates who treated her presence as an uncomfortable social experiment. But Viper had possessed something that couldn't be taught or intimidated away: an intuitive understanding of how aircraft and atmosphere work together, combined with the patience of a sniper and the precision of a surgeon. Her first combat deployment to Iraq had been met with rolled eyes from ground units who questioned whether she could handle the psychological pressure of close air support. That skepticism had evaporated during her third mission, when she had saved an entire Marine platoon by threading Maverick missiles through a sandstorm that had grounded every other aircraft in theater. Now, approaching her target area with the morning sun painting the Hindu Kush in shades of gold and shadow, Viper felt the weight of 19 lives depending on her ability to bring precise violence to those who threatened them. The A-10's titanium bathtub surrounding her cockpit had been designed to withstand small arms fire and shrapnel, but more importantly, it contained a pilot who had learned to channel doubt and discrimination into the kind of focused lethality that made the difference between soldiers going home alive or in flag-draped boxes. Bravo 7, this is Reaper 24. I'm 2 minutes out from your position, she transmitted, her voice carrying the calm authority that had become her signature. I need you to mark your forwardmost position with smoke and give me the direction to your primary threat. Rodriguez's response came immediately. 2-4, popping green smoke now, heavy machine gun positions to our northeast, approximately 200 meters. They've got us pinned down hard. Through her headset, Viper could hear the distinctive crack of AK-47 fire and the deeper thump of a PKM machine gun, sounds that had become the soundtrack of her professional life. Banking into her attack run, Viper's eyes swept across the tactical display, while her hands made minute adjustments to control surfaces that would determine whether she delivered salvation or accidentally created a friendly fire incident that would haunt everyone involved. The valley below was a textbook example of why Afghanistan had broken so many armies throughout history. Narrow corridors flanked by steep terrain that channeled movement and created perfect kill zones for anyone with patience and high ground. Through her targeting pod, she could see the green smoke marking Bravo 7's position, a tiny island of American resolve surrounded by muzzle flashes from multiple insurgent positions. The Taliban had chosen their ambush site with tactical brilliance, using the natural contours of the valley to create overlapping fields of fire while keeping their own forces concealed among the rocks and sparse vegetation that dotted the mountainside. I have eyes on your smoke, Bravo 7, Viper transmitted, her voice steady despite the complexity of the engagement developing below. I'm identifying 3 distinct enemy positions, one heavy machine gun emplacement at your 2 o'clock, approximately 150 meters, another at your 11 o'clock about 200 meters, and what looks like an RPG team moving to flank your southern approach. The mathematics of close air support required splitting her attention between multiple simultaneous calculations: airspeed, altitude, wind direction, angle of attack, and most critically, the precise location of friendly forces who couldn't move due to casualties and enemy fire. 1 degree off in her approach angle could mean the difference between eliminating the threat and creating a tragic mistake that would end careers and destroy lives. 2-4, we're taking fire from all those positions, Rodriguez confirmed, his voice strained but professional. We've got 2 KIA and 4 wounded, including our medic. Whatever you're going to do, please do it fast. Viper felt the familiar transition from tactical assessment to combat execution, her mind shifting into the focused state that had made her one of the most effective close air support pilots in theater. The A-10's heads-up display painted targeting information across her field of vision, while the aircraft's systems confirmed weapons status and calculated firing solutions with mechanical precision. But this moment required more than technology. It demanded the kind of judgment that separated competent pilots from legendary ones. The insurgent positions were close enough to friendly forces that conventional wisdom would have called for multiple gun runs, with extended observation between attacks. Time was a luxury that Bravo 7 didn't possess, which meant Viper would have to trust her instincts and training in a way that would either save 19 American lives or end her career in catastrophe. Bravo 7, I'm coming in hot on the northeast position first, she announced, her thumb moving to the firing selector that would unleash the GAU-8's devastating power. Keep your heads down, this is going to be loud. The A-10 Thunderbolt II had been designed around its primary weapon system, and as Viper squeezed the trigger, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon unleashed its signature sound, a deep, otherworldly BRRRRT that could be heard for miles across the Afghan mountains. The 7-barrel rotary cannon fired depleted uranium rounds at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute, each projectile carrying enough kinetic energy to penetrate tank armor or turn concrete bunkers into dust and debris. From her cockpit, Viper watched the tracers draw a precise line from her aircraft to the insurgent machine gun position, the rounds impacting with devastating effect. The PKM that had been pouring suppressing fire onto Bravo 7's position suddenly fell silent, its crew eliminated in a burst of precision violence that lasted exactly 3 seconds, but changed everything about the tactical situation below. Direct hit on northeast position, Rodriguez reported, his voice carrying the first note of hope that had colored his transmissions all morning. That machine gun is done, 2-4. You just saved our asses. But Viper wasn't finished. Banking hard left to align with the second insurgent position, she could see enemy fighters scrambling to relocate as they realized they were facing a pilot who combined technical precision with tactical aggressiveness. The A-10's relatively slow speed, a disadvantage in air-to-air combat, became a crucial asset in close air support, allowing her to maintain visual contact with both friendly and hostile forces while delivering sustained, accurate fire. Coming around for the 11 o'clock position, she transmitted, adjusting her approach angle to account for the changing geometry of the engagement. The insurgents had learned from the first attack, using smoke and terrain to mask their movements as they tried to establish new firing positions that would allow them to continue their ambush. Through her targeting pod, Viper could see the heat signatures of enemy combatants moving between rock formations, their body heat visible against the cooler mountain stone. The technology that had seemed like science fiction when she was a cadet at the Air Force Academy now guided her decisions with surgical precision, painting a thermal picture of the battlefield that revealed what conventional optics couldn't detect. The second gun run was more challenging. The insurgents had learned to disperse and take cover, forcing her to adjust her approach to avoid civilian structures that intelligence had identified in the area. This was the kind of complex tactical problem that separated exceptional pilots from those who simply followed procedures, requiring her to balance aggression with restraint while soldiers died waiting for her to act. "Target acquired," she announced, lining up her shot with the patience that had become her trademark. The GAU-8 spoke again, its voice echoing off the valley walls as depleted uranium rounds found their targets with mechanical inevitability. The second insurgent position erupted in dust and silence, another threat neutralized by a pilot who had learned to make impossible shots look routine. "Holy shit, 2-4, Rodriguez transmitted, his professional composure finally cracking under the relief of effective close air support. "That's 2 down, but we've still got that RPG team moving on our south flank. They're using the Wadi for cover, maybe 150 meters out." Viper had already spotted the team through her targeting pod, 3 insurgents carrying what appeared to be RPG-7s, using the natural depression of a dry riverbed to approach Bravo 7's position. The tactical situation was evolving exactly as her instructors had described in countless training scenarios, with surviving enemy forces attempting to exploit the chaos of air attacks to gain positional advantage. Banking into her third attack run, she faced the most challenging target yet. The Wadi provided natural concealment that made visual identification difficult, while the proximity to friendly forces demanded precision that pushed both her skills and her aircraft's capabilities to their absolute limits. This was the moment that would define not just the engagement, but her reputation among the ground forces who would either trust her completely or forever question her judgment. "Bravo 7, I need you to mark your southernmost position with smoke," she requested, her voice carrying the calm authority that had become her signature under pressure. "I'm going to put a Maverick missile into that Wadi, but I need to be absolutely certain of your location." The pause that followed lasted only seconds, but felt like hours as Rodriguez processed her request. AGM-65 Maverick missiles were precision weapons designed for destroying armored vehicles and fortified positions, but using one in a danger-close situation required the kind of trust that could only be earned through demonstrated competence and unshakable judgment. "Copy 2-4, red smoke going out now," Rodriguez finally responded. Through her cockpit, Viper could see the crimson marker billowing against the brown landscape, a tiny beacon that marked the difference between success and catastrophe. The mathematics were unforgiving. The Maverick's blast radius versus the distance to friendly forces, wind direction affecting smoke dispersal, and the millisecond timing required to engage a moving target. As she lined up her shot, Viper thought about the path that had brought her to this moment. The discrimination at the academy, the skepticism from ground units, the careful building of trust through countless successful missions. This engagement would either solidify her reputation or end her career, but 19 American soldiers were depending on her to make the impossible shot look routine. The Maverick released with a satisfying thump, its rocket motor igniting as it streaked toward the wadi with lethal precision. The explosion echoed off the valley walls with thunderous authority, sending a pillar of smoke and debris skyward as the precision-guided munition found its target with devastating effect. Through her targeting pod, Viper watched the thermal signatures of the RPG team disappear in the controlled violence of modern warfare, their threat eliminated by technology and training that had transformed her from doubted cadet to lethal guardian angel. "Direct hit 2-4. Rodriguez's voice carried pure elation as the tactical situation transformed from desperate defense to cautious optimism. "That's all 3 positions neutralized. You just saved 19 American lives today." But Viper wasn't ready to declare victory. Her training had taught her that successful close air support required more than eliminating immediate threats. It demanded persistent overwatch until friendly forces could consolidate their position and evacuate casualties. The Taliban were notorious for their patience and tactical discipline, often maintaining reserve forces that could exploit momentary lapses in air cover. "Bravo 7, I'm going to maintain orbit overhead while you consolidate and prepare for exfiltration," she announced, throttling back to conserve fuel while keeping her remaining weapons systems hot. "What's your status on casualties and your ability to move?" The report that came back painted a sobering picture of the cost of modern warfare. 2 soldiers killed in action, 4 wounded including their medic, and ammunition supplies that had been depleted during the prolonged firefight. The tactical victory had come at a price that would be felt by families back home and carried by survivors for the rest of their lives. Through her headset, Viper could hear the organized chaos of soldiers preparing to move their wounded and dead, the professional efficiency that masked profound grief and trauma. This was the reality that civilian populations rarely understood about military operations. Every successful mission carried weight that extended far beyond tactical objectives, touching lives in ways that would echo through generations. 2-4, this is Bagram Control. Colonel Thornfield's voice cut through her thoughts with the authority of command. "We have medical evacuation en route to your location, ETA 12 minutes. Can you maintain overwatch until they're on station?" Viper checked her fuel status and weapons load, calculating the mathematics of persistence versus capability. The A-10's efficient engines and large fuel capacity had been designed for exactly this scenario. Extended loiter time over ground forces who needed protective coverage during vulnerable moments. "Affirmative, Bagram," she replied, settling into a comfortable orbit pattern that would allow her to monitor multiple approach routes while conserving fuel. "I've got plenty of gas and ordnance remaining. Nobody else is going to hurt these soldiers today." The medical evacuation helicopters arrived exactly on schedule, their distinctive wop-wop-wop of rotor blades providing a soundtrack of salvation that had become synonymous with American military operations worldwide. Viper maintained protective overwatch as the A-60 Black Hawks descended into the valley, their crews exhibiting the kind of controlled courage that made dust-off missions possible in hostile territory. Through her targeting pod, she watched the efficient choreography of combat medical evacuation unfold below. Crew chiefs establishing security perimeters while flight medics worked to stabilize casualties for transport. The wounded soldiers of Bravo 7 were loaded with practiced efficiency, each movement representing years of training distilled into life-saving action under pressure. Dust-off complete, the lead medical helicopter reported. 2 urgent surgical, 2 priority lifting off now. As the helicopters climbed away from the valley floor with their precious cargo, Viper felt the familiar mixture of relief and emptiness that followed successful close air support missions. The technical aspects had gone perfectly, all targets engaged and neutralized, no friendly casualties from her weapons systems, tactical objectives achieved with precision that would become a case study for future pilots. But the human cost remained. 2 American soldiers who would never see home again, 4 others whose lives had been forever altered by violence and trauma, families who would receive notifications that would shatter their worlds into before and after. This was the weight that every combat pilot carried, the knowledge that success in war still meant failure for someone. Reaper 2-4, this is Bravo 7 Actual, Rodriguez transmitted, his voice carrying exhaustion and gratitude in equal measure. I don't know who you are up there, but you saved our asses today. My soldiers and I owe you everything. Viper felt the familiar tightness in her throat that always accompanied moments when ground forces expressed their gratitude. The words meant more than any medal or commendation could, representing the trust and respect that she had spent years earning through competence and dedication. Just doing my job, Bravo 7, she replied, her voice carrying the understated professionalism that had become her trademark. Get your people home safe. As she turned toward Bagram Airfield, Viper reflected on the engagement that had just concluded. The Taliban ambush had been tactically sound, the terrain advantageous for the enemy, and the timing designed to maximize American casualties. But they had failed to account for one variable that would prove decisive: the presence of a pilot who had learned to channel doubt and discrimination into lethal effectiveness. The flight back to base gave her time to process the emotions that always followed combat: relief at successful mission completion, sorrow for lives lost, and the quiet satisfaction that came from proving doubters wrong through actions rather than words. By the time her landing gear touched the runway at Bagram, Viper had already begun the mental transition from combat pilot to debriefing participant, preparing to share lessons learned with intelligence officers and fellow aviators. The post-mission debriefing took place in the same operations center where Colonel Thornfield had made his desperate decision hours earlier. Now, under fluorescent lights that seemed harsh after the natural illumination of the Afghan sky, Viper faced a room full of officers who wanted to understand exactly how an unknown pilot had managed to execute a textbook close air support mission under impossible circumstances. Captain Kozlova, Colonel Thornfield began, using her actual name for the first time as he reviewed the mission transcript. Your actions today prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of American lives. I want to understand your tactical thinking during the engagement, particularly your decision to use a Maverick missile in a danger-close situation. The question carried weight beyond simple curiosity. Friendly fire incidents had ended careers and changed policy, making every commander hypersensitive to weapons employment in proximity to friendly forces. Viper's decision to use precision-guided munitions so close to Bravo 7's position had violated several standing guidelines, even though the results had proven her judgment correct. Sir, the tactical situation demanded immediate and precise action, Viper replied, her voice carrying the professional detachment that masked deeper emotions. The GAU-8 was effective against the fixed positions, but the RPG team in the Wadi required a precision strike that could eliminate the threat without creating a danger zone that would extend to friendly forces. Lieutenant Collins, the young officer who had initially handled the desperate communications from Bravo 7, leaned forward with obvious curiosity. "Captain, how did you calculate the safe distance for Maverick employment? Our current row suggests a minimum separation that would have made that shot inadvisable." The question revealed the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application that separated classroom instruction from combat reality. Viper had made split-second calculations based on terrain analysis, wind conditions, and precise knowledge of her weapon systems, factors that couldn't be easily quantified in standard operating procedures. "Lieutenant, I used the terrain masking of the Wadi to contain the blast effects, while ensuring that fragmentation patterns would be directed away from friendly positions," she explained, her words carrying the authority of someone who had studied her craft with obsessive dedication. The Maverick's warhead and fusing options allowed for precise control of explosive effects in a way that GAU-8 strafing runs couldn't achieve. Colonel Thornfield nodded slowly, recognizing expertise when he heard it. The mission had succeeded because of tactical knowledge that went far beyond standard training, representing the kind of professional mastery that separated exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. But he still needed to understand the larger picture of how an unknown captain had appeared at exactly the right moment with exactly the right capabilities. "Captain Kozlova, according to our flight schedules, you weren't assigned to this sector today," he continued. "Can you explain how you happened to be in position to respond to Bravo 7's emergency?"